Ohio State football fans, brace yourselves, because the 2026 season could be one of the most fascinating, and potentially nerve-wracking, years the program has faced in a long time, and while the ceiling is still national championship high, the floor might be lower than Buckeye Nation is comfortable admitting, especially when you zoom out and really look at what's coming next for the Ohio State Buckeyes, because this isn't just another reload year, this is a convergence of roster turnover, elite opponents, brutal road environments, and sky-high expectations that could collide in the worst possible way if things start to slip early. And it all begins with how the 2025 season ended. A year that started with perfection, a 12-0 regular season, championship dreams, and playoff momentum, only to unravel late when the Buckeyes couldn't finish the job the way fans expected, even though they finally took care of business against Michigan, a result that softened the blow but didn't erase the frustration of falling short of back-to-back titles. And now heading into 2026, Ohio State is staring down the reality of losing at least 4 first-round NFL talents, which isn't unusual for this program but becomes far more dangerous when paired with one of the toughest schedules in recent memory, because unlike years where talent alone could overwhelm most opponents, the Buckeyes are about to face a gauntlet where every small mistake could snowball, especially away from Columbus, and that's where the worst-case scenario starts to take shape, because the road slate alone is borderline unforgiving, featuring trips to hostile environments against programs that are either peaking or physically built to punish mistakes, starting with a massive road showdown against the Texas Longhorns, a team loaded with speed, confidence, and playoff expectations of their own, and that's followed by road games against the Indiana Hoosiers and the Iowa Hawkeyes, two places where style of play matters, weather can turn ugly, and one bad quarter can flip an entire season narrative. And if that wasn't enough, Ohio State doesn't get a breather at home either, because they're welcoming elite programs into the horseshoe, including the USC Trojans, the Oregon Ducks, and yes, the Michigan Wolverines, and while Michigan may not be at peak strength by then, rivalry games never follow logic, and throwing that matchup into an already stacked schedule just adds emotional volatility, and when you stack all 6 of those games together, it becomes clear why 2026 isn't just difficult, it's dangerous, because Ohio State traditionally defines a bad year as losing 2 games, maybe 3 at most, and under Ryan Day, the program hasn't experienced a regular season collapse of 4 losses, but this schedule opens the door to something Buckeye fans rarely even consider, because losing on the road to Texas isn't outrageous, dropping a grinded-out game at Iowa isn't shocking, slipping up against Oregon's speed or USC's offensive firepower is very possible, and if Indiana catches Ohio State during a transition moment at quarterback or along the offensive line, suddenly you're talking about 4 losses before anyone can blink, and in the modern college football landscape, 4 losses might be survivable for some programs, but not when you're Ohio State and not when you're competing for a spot in the expanded college football playoff, because even with 12 teams now making the field, the margin for error shrinks when your brand brings expectations and your losses come against ranked opponents, and that's what makes the worst-case scenario so unsettling, because it's not about Ohio State becoming bad, it's about Ohio State being good but not great in a year where greatness is required every single week, especially if there are growing pains at quarterback, where a player like Julian Sayin might be immensely talented but still learning how to command an offense under playoff-level pressure, and if that learning curve overlaps with road trips to Austin, Iowa City, or Bloomington, things can spiral quickly, because once confidence dips, the noise gets louder, the scrutiny increases, and suddenly every possession feels like a referendum on the program's direction, and the scary part is that none of this requires catastrophe to unfold. No major injuries, no locker room issues, no coaching meltdown, just a few missed opportunities, a couple of slow starts, and 1 or 2 games where Ohio State doesn't impose its will early, and suddenly a 10-2 season becomes 9-3, then 8-4, and that's when the unthinkable starts to creep in. Missing the playoff entirely for the first time in the 12-team era, a scenario that would send shockwaves through the fanbase even if the losses were understandable on paper, because Ohio State isn't judged by context, it's judged by outcomes, and while this worst-case scenario isn't the most likely path, far from it, it's realistic enough that fans should mentally prepare for turbulence, because 2026 is shaping up to be a season where nothing is handed to the Buckeyes, where every win must be earned, and where even a talented roster could find itself battling uphill just to stay in the national conversation, making it one of the most high-risk, high-reward seasons Ohio State football has faced in years.